Hey, Rachel. Welcome to the Torch. Thank you so much for joining today and for being my first guest. Rachel Nichols is my friend from Indiana, and she has so many interesting things to share, and I'm really excited. Um, Rachel, would you like to introduce yourself a little bit, please?
Um, I'm Rachel Nichols. I live with my parents. Um, I've had kind of a rocky past. I haven't done a lot of things. Is I was a career psychiatric patient for 25 years.
Yes, yes, and we'll get into
I am
that.
doing better now. Thinking more clearly. Problem is
Yes,
coping with negative emotions that were suppressed for so long.
yes.
Grieving what was lost and
Hmm.
trying to deal with an autoimmune disease that I seem to have gotten now after almost a quarter century on drugs.
And you're recently recovering from this, and I mean, you look great. I mean, as even from last time I saw you, you look like you're doing a lot better. So,
Huh,
but
thanks.
how are you feeling?
Uh, I have COVID, the tail end.
The tail end of COVID.
It's a very mild strain.
Okay. Well, I'm glad that you're on the tail end of it. And as part of an introduction to Rachel, I also want to introduce you to. She's a great writer. She has a book published on Amazon.
Two
And
of them.
oh, two books. Okay.
One of them is only in ebook form because it's too skinny until I add a couple short stories to put into print.
Okay.
But you can get it for 99 cents. It's anemia.
Anemia. Okay. There's one called Anemia, and then there's another called Maxwell's
Maxwell's
Rules.
rules.
Maxwell's Rules. So I haven't I haven't read them yet, but I'll post links to these books so you can get them. But I did read um, the blurb introduction to Maxwell's Rules on Amazon, and it's just it's such a great story, a great premise. Um, so there's Maxwell's Rules, Anemia, and Rachel also is a blogger. She has a blog called Consumptive Chronicles. Is that correct?
Consumption
Con-
chronicles.
Consumption Chronicles. Okay,
Because it's
consumption.
about being a consumer.
Okay.
Um,
Ah, okay.
Psychiatry wants you to be a consumer, and so does Papa Klaus
Papa Klaus.
of the
Okay,
WEF.
of the WEF. Yeah, right. We have to remember to use our code language when necessary and talking about certain things. But one of the reasons Rachel participates in our Great Books Club. She's a great reader and um, studied English in college. Is that correct?
Yep, I was originally going to be a professor or a children's librarian.
Okay. Well, there's still lots of things that I think are in a bright future for you, and using those that knowledge and experience that you've gained, and so also one of the reasons why I wanted to invite Rachel onto to the torch was to discuss something in which she is one of the world experts, in my opinion, is and that is psychiatry. And becoming a world expert in psychiatry doesn't mean necessarily going to medical school or reading about psychiatry. Sometimes becoming a world expert has to do with going through the kinds of experiences that Rachel has gone through and surviving them, and not only surviving but coming out so much stronger and with so much to report on. Um, so and that's one theme in my YouTube channel, The Torch, that I have a whole playlist about, which is about psychiatry and anti-psychiatry. But what would you like to tell us about um, your experience with psychiatry, how it began, and so forth?
Well, I did have emotional problems.
Yeah.
Um, I was we moved around a lot when I was a kid.
Okay.
I was really worried about always doing the right thing because of church,
Mm-hmm.
because my dad got fired from a few churches and I blamed myself
Mm-hmm.
because of internal fighting and politics, church politics.
Okay.
Um, and I was very worried about how I appeared to other people.
Okay.
And it did not help that I was a teenager.
No, I'm
I went
sure.
off to college and suffered what they call social anxiety disorder and depression. I do feel negative emotions more strongly than your average person. I
Mm-hmm.
am what some would call too sensitive. Um,
Yeah.
but basically, I could have learned coping skills if I tried hard enough and learned to get along and make small talk, which
Yeah.
did not come as easily for me as other girls.
Okay.
Um, I felt like there was something horribly, horribly wrong with me.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I thought, well, maybe a psychiatrist would help.
Okay.
And the therapist said she couldn't help me because I was too scared of other people.
Mm-hmm.
Instead of using like exposure therapy and forcing myself out there, which would have been the cure for a phobia,
Okay.
she's I decided to do it, she said, and go to a psychiatrist like she recommended.
Okay.
He put me on a tiny amount of stelazine, which seemed to help.
Yeah.
Um, it deadened my nervousness
Okay.
and helped me to not be afraid of people.
Okay.
But
So,
it
mhm.
also made me feel dead inside, so I didn't enjoy as much stuff like I used to. For example, I couldn't
Mhm.
enjoy music, or and I didn't laugh as easily.
Mhm. So stelazine was the first
Yeah,
that,
what they
but
call an antipsychotic or a
right.
neuroleptic. I only took 6 milligrams to start with.
Okay. But you were drawn into psychiatry by what I would say are, I mean, being a sensitive person, I think is a positive thing, and people
Yeah,
should probably be a little more sensitive than they are. So I would say that you're in your young youth and college years, some of these things that you experienced, although troubling, are would you describe them as also part of life? I mean,
yeah, they came a little too hard for me.
yeah.
Partly, as I said, I'd had some bad experiences being taunted in high
Uh-huh.
school. It made me very self-conscious, which only exacerbated the problem.
Okay. But I mean, I guess what I'm getting at is although you felt these terrible feelings and were going through these troubles, this is something maybe in retrospect that you see that a lot of people go through,
Yeah,
and it's not necessarily like you described. What was the label that they first gave you, or that you said you
they didn't give me a label for the
okay.
first 18 months.
Oh, okay.
My junior year, I was commuting back and forth quite a distance,
Okay.
and that was stressful.
Yeah.
Um, the neuroleptic, the benefits had worn off,
Right.
and I was having what some would call um thoughts that I couldn't control that could come into my head without my wanting them.
Okay.
Intrusive thoughts.
Intrusive thoughts. Okay.
They came when I was nervous.
Uh-huh.
And I've since come to the decision that there's a spiritual component behind them.
Okay.
If you, I found I can make them better by praying or simply fighting back. But
Yes.
but I thought, oh, I read up this stuff. It never
Yeah.
occurred to me that psychology and psychiatry were not sciences, not real ones. Although I like the psychology better if you view it as a humanity,
Hmm.
it can be more like, sociology, say.
Right.
But psychiatry pretends to be science and it is therefore worse than psychology.
Exactly. But none of
They,
this.
oh, we have all the answers. They
Right.
do not. They pretend to know everything. As they may even think they know everything about the human brain, but they do not. All they work. They help people, supposedly help. The drugs work by overriding your natural brain functioning and destroying it, especially
Hmm.
after prolonged use.
Yes.
And they're not confined to the brain either. They do things to your digestive system and your liver, and they can wreck your autoimmune system. I wish I had the link, but there is a woman I followed while I was trying getting ready to taper. I knew it would be a long, painful process, so I had to
Hmm.
find the right situation, and I
Right.
knew no doctor would help me.
Right.
So I had to go into almost into hiding. A plan to escape presented itself,
Yeah.
and I took well over a year to go off all my drugs, especially Effexor. That the SSRI was the hardest.
Oh,
But
that's
there is a
horrible.
woman named Monica, I can't remember her name. It's
Hmm.
all in archives now, but it took her years, 6 years to go off all six of her drugs. And then she was in bed for 2 years. She was so sensitive to
Yeah.
stimuli, lights, all kinds of things. She was horribly sick for 2 years,
Hmm.
despite the slow taper.
But when you were in college or in your youth, you had no way of knowing really anything about
Oh yeah,
psychiatry
I
or
trusted
yeah.
older authority figures.
Uh-huh.
I was I've never been a rebel to this day. I do not consider myself a rebel.
Yeah.
I will I try to obey people in authority.
Yeah.
Um, it's scary to find out that they do not have your best interest at heart, and that they would just as soon see you dead. It's, I mean,
Yeah.
it sounds cruel. I'm not
Yeah.
saying that doctors want to, psychiatrists want to by any means. No, they don't want to their patient,
Yeah.
but and yet they let it happen.
Yeah.
They should know that the drugs are causing it. I had a friend who
Yeah.
died at 29 because of the neuroleptic she was taking that was giving her grand mal seizures.
Yeah.
Her psychiatrist knew she was having these seizures and that they could endanger her life, but told her to keep taking the drug.
Right.
What are you supposed to think?
Right. Right. There's an inherent trust in society and in especially medical authority. I would say there is legitimate authority that does have our best interests in mind, but it's very rare, very difficult to find. And unfortunately, there are many who um, who are in these positions of authority who, like you said, their incentives are all basically influenced by um, big pharma and by their professional interests as psychiatrists. Um, so how did you feel like when you first were drawn into psychiatry and you were trusting? Did you feel? And you said the stelazine, you felt like it was starting to help you. Can you
Yeah.
describe a little bit about that, like transition and what you think about it now?
Um, it was a small amount.
Uh huh.
As I said, it made me feel dead inside, but
Yeah.
I wasn't afraid of people anymore. I overcame my social fears.
Okay. So
I believe that exposure, what they call exposure therapy, could have done better, though. That's where
okay.
you transition into what frightens you and overcome a phobia.
Oh, I see. So at first you believed that the stelazine it was doing something to your brain and to your body, and it was doing
Yeah.
something that you interpreted as helping you. Is that correct?
Yes, it made me less nervous. It tranquilized me.
It tranquilized you. So Peter Bregan, and Rachel knows Peter Bregan a lot about Peter Bregan. He has called this phenomenon medication spellbinding. So this tranquilization, even though people think that they're being healed and being helped, and in a way, it kind of does. But what's really happening is that the drug is tranquilizing the person or sedating them, or it's like a street drug or like alcohol in a way of numbing the pain. So people interpret it as healing, But looking back on it, would you say that the Stelazine helped you, or how would you interpret it now?
Um, it was like a downer, a
Okay.
drug, what they call downers.
Okay.
The thing is, my family liked it too, because I was
Oh,
less on edge and nervous, which bugged them.
okay. Part of the problem is not just your own feelings and anxieties. It's also how your family was reacting to them.
They thought
So
it was a very good, positive thing.
so positive in that Rachel is now more sedated and easy,
Calm.
calm. I know psychiatry has terms for this kind of thing. They're not coming to mind immediately, but
Well, the thing is, your loved ones cannot see how
yeah,
you feel, or they can't see your thoughts or feelings.
right,
They can't experience them the way you do. They
yeah,
see that you're no longer complaining or acting odd because you're too tired or crippled, and they or even depressed. You could be more depressed. Oh, good, you're doing better because they don't see how miserable you are.
okay, yeah. This is a major difficulty and component of psychiatry that I think we'll highlight, and I hope to have Rachel on to talk about psychiatry and other things as frequently as we can. But this is a component the way that psychiatry uses not just the so-called patient's own problems against him or her, but also the family's reactions and assumptions against that person as well.
They often they have two reactions toward supporting families. One, they don't like them because they interfere, but on the other hand, they like to use them to get them
Mm-hmm.
involved. Oh, your loved one doesn't know what's best for them and will complain of things or will try to go complain and try to go off the medicines, and you have to let us know if they're doing that.
Right. So it
And
almost become
for a
yeah,
while, they thought that I was being naughty, but finally they decided, okay, it's just not working as well as the doctor thinks it should.
right. So the psychiatry almost sets up this kind of strange atmosphere where even the family members start policing the behavior of the individual in question.
And if they don't, and even if they do, it's like they beat you up. Even if you comply, they'll punish you for something or other.
Right.
And they don't like your family getting involved either, except to snitch on you. They get upset if your family is too supportive and loving.
Yeah.
Julie Green,
Yeah.
I wish she could be interviewed, but she's gone now because the lithium rotted her kidneys.
Yeah. So
She
yeah.
said that they did their best they could to put a wedge between her and her parents.
Yeah. That's very sad. Um yeah, I even remember reading in some books by Thomas Saz or Whitaker or Bregan about in the olden days how sometimes maybe this was in England a long time ago where uh, if a husband didn't like the way that his wife was behaving, he could basically get her diagnosed and locked up, you know, for a while, and all under the pretense that this is psychiatry is this great science of the mind that helps solve all these problems and meanwhile people are getting locked up, their brains are getting gouged out with lobotomies, you know and so the whole history of psychiatry is an interesting topic that we could get
It's
into as
more
well.
how to get rid of, how to basically deal with people who, there are some people who, due to emotional trauma for a period at
Hmm.
least, will
Hmm.
run wild and not be able to take care of themselves, like, King
Hmm.
Lear.
Yeah.
That's been since time immemorial, but it used to be common knowledge that if they were harmless, the best thing to do It'd be to give them TLC, three hots and a cot, and try to love them back to sanity.
Yeah.
That is not what modern psychiatry does. It does just the opposite. It's about
Yeah.
drugs,
Yeah.
drugs, more drugs, and then you do your best through what they call therapy and sessions and stuff to convince the person that they are hopeless, that they have
Hmm.
something immutably wrong and inferior and bad about their brain, and that they're
Right.
genetically bad people.
Right.
And you have to do penance by taking lots and lots and lots of drugs and shocks and stuff for the rest of your life as punishment for being born defective. It's
Right.
like it's like original sin, only the idea is only some people deserve this kind of flagellation. And if you
Hmm.
take it by if you take it by choice, you'll be one of the good patients, one of the good consumers, and you might even be granted an honorary professorship, kind of like Kay Redfield Jameson.
Oh, right.
She's one of
Tell
the successful patients.
right. Tell us a little bit
Or
about
they'll
that.
become a poster child like Patty Duke.
Right. Tell us a little more about how that works. This poster child phenomenon or getting promoted. Yeah.
You study up on psychiatry. Actually, I was a card carrying member of NAMI. Well, we didn't exactly have cards,
What is
but
NAMI?
I was active in NAMI for a while.
Tell our
National Alliance
audience.
for the Mentally Ill.
Okay. Okay. Yeah.
I was way more involved in it than my mother my mother came to a few meetings, but I was the one who was really into it.
So you were in the system, let's say, for quite a while. Like
I
how
believed it. It never
yeah.
occurred to me to question it because I never came across alternative points of view.
Okay.
When I found stuff by Glasser, some people get angry. With me, I actually felt a sense of hope.
Yeah.
I thought maybe I'm not a bad person. Maybe I'm not really crazy.
Yeah.
Maybe I was right when I kept telling people that the drugs made me feel worse and less able to
Right.
cope and less able to think clearly. They kept telling,
Exactly.
oh, it'll restore your brain. I thought, well, how come I have a harder time thinking clearly? Despite the spellbinding effect, I knew something was wrong up here, and it got worse the more stuff I took.
Right.
And I kept
So
trying to obey the doctors.
so you were in the system and trying to get through it through obedience and
Yeah, I was
yeah.
a very good patient. I
Uh-huh.
believed everything they told me. I did everything they told me to the best of my ability,
Right.
and it did not help me.
Right. So you mentioned this kind of aha or wake up moment with an author named Glasser. Can you tell us more about that?
Um, I read the book. Um, you might not like it because he it uses words like mental illness, but
Yeah.
he says that they do not originate in the brain.
Okay.
He makes the point that if mental illnesses were really brain illnesses, that we have neurologists. He
Hmm.
said that they deal with brain problems. Why do we need psychiatrists if mental illness is a brain disease?
And what's the title of the book?
Warning: Psychiatry can be hazardous for your mental health by William Glasser.
Okay.
He devised a therapy called choice therapy.
Okay.
I believe Peter Bregan, who is still alive
Yeah.
and is helping us in this current crisis,
Yes.
he he wrote Toxic Psychiatry, and he has founded his own school called Empathy Therapy, I believe.
Right.
And basically, I don't think you have to be a counselor or a shrink to help people. Just listen to them, offer them TLC and love.
Definitely. Definitely. I completely agree. Do you want to describe a little more about the unfolding of so you had this awakening where you read Glasser's book on psychiatry can be hazardous to your mental health and tell us more about your the process from that moment until the present.
Okay, but would you like to hear more about how I got sucked into the system
Sure.
and got
Yeah.
diagnosed bipolar, which is a hard
Oh. Oh yeah. Yeah, definitely. That's a
Well,
huge
anyhow,
step.
in my
Yeah.
junior year, like
Right.
18 months after I started
Yeah.
with the neuroleptic stelazine,
Yeah.
I went to a shrink again because the same one because of my intrusive thoughts. I
Yes.
said, "Is this connected to OCD or something?" He said, "Oh,
Mm-hmm.
I'll put you on an antidepressant that just
Mm-hmm.
came out. This is new, and it
Yeah.
does all this wonderful stuff. It's called anafranil." I
Oh.
took it, and like a day or two later, I started to feel different. I quit sleeping. I didn't sleep for 3 weeks the whole time I took it, John.
Oh my gosh.
And I started hallucinating. I felt
Anafranil.
really weird. It was like being on acid.
Wow.
And the doctor said, "Oh, no, it never has that effect on anyone." I remember Mom. I only heard one conversation of this, one side of the conversation. I heard Mom call him,
Yeah.
and she was practically in tears. "Rachel hasn't slept in 2 weeks. She is out of her mind. What should I do?" He said, "Oh, it never has that effect on anyone."
Right.
And then I found out, I went to another shrink, and he looked up the side effects of his drug that had already come out in a pill book. They didn't have them
Mm.
online yet. He said, this drug can cause hallucinations, delusions, um, insomnia, all these things. And I'd been, "Oh, I never has that effect on anyone." Apparently, he was too busy to get to the golf course or whatever. He probably learned everything he knew about the pill from a cute farmer rep who looked like Barbie and only knew what she'd been told by the marketing team.
Well, yeah. Yeah, exactly. So 3 weeks of no sleep, that can't be helpful.
And then they put me on a massive quantity of Haldol. I was like a zombie, and it gave me Parkinsonism, these seizures, these mini seizures. No fun at all. And I got
Mm.
blamed. Well, if you were taking the drug as we were prescribed it, you would not be having these problems. And
Mm.
it was like my whole life was destroyed. They
Mm-hmm.
gave me a hard diagnosis, first of schizophrenia, or no, schizoaffective. They
Yeah.
changed it to bipolar. I,
Mm.
I wanted to myself.
And all this was at a hospital, I'm assuming.
Yeah, I wound up in a hospital after 3 weeks of not being able to sleep, which they blamed on my brain.
So how did that happen? I mean, obviously you're not sleeping for 3 weeks. How did
I'm
you
not
go?
what?
Sorry. How did that happen? You're not sleeping for 3 weeks. What? How did you end up in the hospital?
I was scared because I was hallucinating.
Okay.
And so the doctor pulled some strings and got me admitted. I went willingly
Okay.
because I was scared of hallucinations, Sean. And they
Yeah.
told me, then they said, "Oh, it's your brain. You were
Hmm.
born this way and it just suddenly surfaced." I said, "Well, how come it didn't surface? Oh, it unmasked what was always wrong with you."
Oh, okay. So rather than telling the truth about what actually is happening, that the drug is causing you to hallucinate, they're telling you you're a defective person. You've always been defective,
And
and
it
it's all.
frightened me. It
Yeah.
frightened me. I was afraid of going insane.
Yes.
I was afraid of losing it.
Uh-huh.
And they told me, "Well, unless you always do exactly as you're told, you will go insane and we won't be able to bring you back."
Uh-huh.
It was terrifying and depressing. It just
Yeah.
crushed all my hopes, John.
I'm sorry. I'm so sorry, Rachel.
Yeah. And I think I did have another bout of depression later before I went off the drugs.
Hmm.
But it hit me that what I'd been through was totally preventable. It had happened just because medicine has become so corrupt and doctors are not looking out for our best interest. They're more consumed with making money than actually helping people, and they will
Mm-hmm.
turn. I'm not saying they're evil or anything like that, but they
Mm-hmm.
will turn a blind eye. You know, like the people during the Holocaust, they sang a little louder because they didn't want to hear the screams of men, women, and children as they were being dragged away to death camps.
Mm-hmm.
That's what doctors do, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
They want to believe that they are helping people. You know, when they see people getting worse, they cling tighter to their beliefs. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
oh, poor insight or something. And they get really angry. And part of the reason they shout you down if you try to talk back is because they are shouting down their own consciences.
Interesting. So, so 3 weeks of sleeplessness, then the hospital. You were willingly led there and given a label of schizoaffective and given Haldol and anafranil. No, um, anafranil was before that. Then you were given Haldol. What
Megadose.
mega doses of Haldol? You become a zombie. What what happened after that?
I moved around. Basically because my parents kept moving and I could no longer live independently. Um, because that because I couldn't think straight. Um, I moved with them.
Hmm.
Um, I couldn't finish college, although I did manage to finally finish in a satellite. They didn't have
Hmm.
online courses back then.
Hmm.
Um, Graduated in 99 instead of 95.
Hmm.
Uh, I'd actually gone to college before I was 18. um,
Okay.
it was a year ahead. Um, Anyhow, I moved around and I kept getting new doctors. One of them actually seemed to be onto something.
Hmm.
He meant well. He honestly cared about his patients and he talked to us like people.
Hmm.
He seemed interested in my personal life as far as it having an effect on my problems. And he
Right.
seemed shocked. He said to me, I heard him saying to a nurse, "My patients get better when I put them on smaller dosages of drugs."
So an honest doctor.
Well, I think he was going through a paradigm shift. He was finding out what they taught him in med school wasn't necessarily true.
Right.
He
But
was
at
a
this
psychiatrist.
but at this time you still were in the system and still believed.
Yeah. And he actually
Yeah.
took me off of
Oh.
a lot of medicine, and it helped me so much. Then my dad moved to another church, and I went with them, and it was in southern Missouri. And a woman, I got the only truly evil shrink I ever had. She seemed to have a sadistic side, which she took out on patients. I call her Dr. Ratchet.
Dr. Ratchet. For
Yeah,
for our audience who doesn't know who Dr. Ratchet is, that's
Nurse
the
Ratchet.
nurse Ratchet from One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest.
Yep, she put me back on drugs that I'd been doing fine without. She said, "Well, you took them in the past, they must be good for you."
How old were you at this time?
20.
20. So still very young, very um, malleable or
Or no, actually, I was older, like 24. But
okay.
I'd been in the system since I was 20, you might say, 20 or 21.
Okay.
And the horrible thing is, I don't believe I'll ever be able to fully adult because I missed out on all these milestones.
Hmm.
And my brain is damaged. I believe the frontal part
Yeah.
will never fully mend. So I struggle to organize. That kind of runs in the family, but it's so frustrating. I'm very bad at short-term memory and
Hmm.
organization. The amygdala can be restored, but the frontal cortex, the frontal lobes are another matter.
Well, it's definitely, I mean, your challenge, the things you've gone through are terrible. I believe there's great hope, and whatever damage your brain has sustained, I think your damaged brain is is better than 99% of the brains out there. So uh, I I
Thanks.
really appreciate the insights. I mean, Rachel comes to our Great Books Club and shares great insights about things we're reading, and her writing, as if anyone who reads her writing can see that she's very very intelligent, and that and the human body is a miraculous creation. Rachel and I share a belief in God, and I believe that God created our bodies, even our brains and our frontal lobes, to miraculously heal. And I believe that Christ can heal anything,
Yeah.
including including that. And it's a long, difficult process, but I think you're making amazing progress and probably doing a lot better than you think you are. Um, so so you're still in the system at this time. You're about 24, and you're feeling. Did you ever start wondering, like, okay, maybe psychiatrists don't really have my best interest in mind?
Um, it never occurred to me.
Okay,
I just I've been brought up to believe that you obey authorities.
yeah,
Unless, of course, they told me to do something wrong, but this was not clearly wrong.
right,
Doctors give you medicine and you take it because
yeah,
they know better than you do.
right. So you're with this nurse Ratchet for a while, and
Dr. Ratchet.
Doctor Ratchet. So she was a psychiatrist,
Yeah.
and
Thing
yeah,
is, she put me on a bunch more medicine,
what'd she
and
put you
I
on?
seem to, I completely flaked out.
Yeah, what kind of things did she put you on?
Oh, a whole cocktail,
Yeah,
3 or 4 different drugs,
do you remember the names?
neuroleptic,
Yeah,
serotonin reuptake, mucker.
SSRIs.
Yeah, I think she had me on two neuroleptics, one SSRI, and it basically I don't like the selective serotonin reuptake inhibitor because there's
Yeah,
nothing selective about it. And then she had me on one of those things for mood stabilizers. I'm not sure exactly, but they're basically tranquilizers.
right. So you're on a
So
cocktail of drugs, and by
it
this time, do you have a diagnosis, or I should put those in quotes,
it's
diagnosis?
actually the a better doctor
Yeah,
that I got after her diagnosed me as bipolar 2 is I had all the symptoms, which ironically are created by the cocktail itself.
right. So the drugs create the symptoms, and then the psychiatrist
Uses them to justify
uses
diagnosis.
exactly. So psychiatry actually creates the very problems that it pretends to resolve.
Yeah. If you notice, most career mental patients start out with something like depression, or they may have a really bad time, or they act out as children or teenagers and
Hmm.
smoke some weed, and that messes up their brains.
Yeah,
So they get dragged off to the hospital for acting weird in public or
yeah,
even doing illegal stuff.
right.
They'd actually be better off just spending a night in jail, and then they'd get in the straight and narrow after that. In the old days, that's what happened.
Uh
No,
huh.
no, they've got it. Oh, that would be cruel and inhumane to make them do time in jail. Put them in a hospital that is like a jail and forcibly drug them. That's the kind thing to do. Make them
Right,
spend weeks in a hospital that's like a jail and drug them.
right. So that's what happened to you. You were given this label of bipolar 2, and then Nurse Ratchet put you on this cocktail. And what did the cocktail, what did that do to you?
It gave me ups and downs.
Uh huh.
It contained uppers and downers. Some
Okay.
people get angry when I say that, but yeah, that's what they are.
Yeah.
That's the effect they're supposed to have.
Mm-hmm.
Neuroleptics are supposed to bring you down, and what they call antidepressants, SSRIs, are supposed to bring you up.
Right.
They don't always, of course, but that's the desired effect they have.
Right. And how long were you with this Dr. Ratchet, and how long
In
were
a
you on
few
this
years, she
cocktail?
actually, just a couple of years.
Okay.
She put me in. She actually put me in a group home, or I'm not sure what you call it, but
Yeah. Okay. And
basically, I
yeah.
had no freedom.
Okay.
My parents managed to get me out. The doctor who ran the place was decent enough.
So unfold for us your story from that point to the point where you encountered Glasser. Like how did that develop?
Sorry.
So how did if you could unfold your story from the point where we are to the point where you started to realize when you read Glasser's book on psychiatry.
Um, I thought, wow. So it was like the end of The Wizard of Oz. You had it in you all along to get better, but they were worse than The Wizard of Oz. They were holding me back.
So psychiatrists and big pharma being the man behind the curtain, so to speak.
Yeah. And it also, I actually start when I accepted my mental illness, I acted crazier because I really believed I couldn't help myself. And so I acted accordingly.
Right. So once you're told that your brain is defective, that you're bipolar or this or that,
Yep.
then I mean, in addition to the drugs causing chaos in your brain, you also start to believe and act according to the label that you've been given.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I talked to my friend Julie, and she had the
Yeah.
same thing. She said in
Okay.
her 20s, even though she was drugged, she had a desire to do something with her life. And they keep
Hmm.
telling you you can't. And you can't
Right.
think as clearly. You're on drugs. And so you
Yeah.
act out.
So what did they tell you? Like I mean, what kind of things did they tell you that made you think you couldn't do something with your life?
They told me basically you'll never be able to hold down a job.
Hmm.
You'll never finish your schooling, though I did anyhow.
Hmm.
Um, I
Good for you.
even did a little bit of work, but I got punished by the system, the the government. The right now I still get paid, which I believe if anybody deserves disability payments, I do.
Hmm.
Although it's not what they said, basically they caused my disability. Um, I substitute taught. I did tutoring.
Hmm. And this was all during the same time period.
Yeah, well, sort of. Yeah, I
Yeah.
finished my college too, even though it took longer.
Hmm. And
The
how
people at the center, the some of the caseworkers and therapists did not like the fact that I was going to college.
no, no.
They kept tearing me down in front of the others in group therapy because of that.
How was your college experience besides all the psychiatry and drugs? How was your college
It
experience?
was a way to forget how horrible things were. I could
Okay.
go out and be there among normal people
Yeah.
and forget that I was crazy.
Uh-huh. Right.
And I even did some writing, and that helped.
Uh-huh. What kind of things
Maxwell's
did
Rules, I wrote
Oh,
in 1999, part of it. It
okay.
started out as a screenplay.
Okay.
And it's sort of like a 90s sitcom.
Okay.
Or not
Yeah, the
sitcom, but comedy movie.
yeah, it's such a great premise for a story, and I'll post the link to Maxwell's Rules in
Yeah,
below.
an interesting thing is it's been done before in different movies. Usually
Uh-huh.
it's like a wish gone bad. In
Okay.
this, it is not a wish. It's just a punishment, more like Scrooge's journey or Bill Murray
Right.
in Groundhog Day.
Right, right. So you wrote Maxwell's Rules and you graduated from college,
Hmm.
but still all this time you were you had been convinced that you were mentally ill, that your brain was defective, that you could never hold down a job, that you could never do this or that, that
Yeah,
basically you were a career mental patient. You were convinced still at this time.
yeah.
Yeah. And, but how long did that last?
Till I was almost 40.
Okay. So from
And
your
even
20s
even
to,
after
yeah,
even
yeah,
after I read William Glasser's book
yeah.
and a lot of other books, I was afraid to go off of the drugs because I didn't know how. The internet helped me, and the
Okay.
only support I could find was on the online.
So no, none of your doctors or authority
No,
figures told you anything about the dangers of it or how to withdraw from them.
none of the doctors seemed to know how to come off.
Uh-huh. And could you tell us, I mean, is it important to withdraw if you're going to withdraw from the drugs, is it important to do it slowly and why?
Do it very slowly. Big problem with your typical doctor is even if they try, even if they are willing to get you off of drugs,
Mhm.
they will do it way too fast. My
Mhm.
mother is on at least one kind of antidepressant right now,
Yeah.
and I told her, if you ever do decide, I have a site called Surviving Antidepressants you can use.
Yeah.
Your doctor probably will do it too fast
Mhm. And why is it dangerous to go off too fast?
because you will go crazy, most likely.
Yeah.
Or you may even get so horribly sick from the sudden withdrawal that you die. It is like
Uh-huh.
heroin or meth.
Yeah, it's really awful. Yeah, I want to make sure to tell our audience that anyone who is listening and who wants to get off of psychotropic drugs must do so as slowly as and gradually as possible, because as much as the drugs damage the brain as you're taking them, going off of them cold turkey is also very dangerous and can, like Rachel said, it can cause a person to go completely berserk. And this is, Peter Bregan has written extensively about it, Robert Whitaker as well. But a lot of these school shootings and horrible acts of violence that we've seen in the news, a lot of them, if you do a little research, you'll find out there's psychiatry is somewhere in the background.
And and then the worst part is often you'll be wind up in the hospital again, and they'll put you on more drugs than ever, and they may even have you court committed to get injections. I've seen
Right.
it happen.
Right.
A lot of people were always going off the drugs, even though they didn't read the stuff I did, because
Hmm.
they made them feel bad.
Right.
And they just would quit taking them and they'd go loopy. And they'd wind
Hmm.
up in the hospital. See what happened? And the case manager would say, see what happens when you don't follow doctor's orders.
Right.
I
Exactly.
figured there was something wrong that maybe we shouldn't go off them too quickly. Because I'd seen it happen to other people even before I entered the system. For
Okay.
example, a man my dad tried to help
Yeah.
would quit taking his drugs, and he wound one night he went loopy and didn't know what he was doing, and he wound up at Hardee's downtown in his boxers, and I wondered why that was happening. And as I read
Mhm.
William Glasser, I realized it is withdrawal. They're having DTS, and
DTs mean what is DTs?
as an delirium tremors when you go off alcohol.
Okay.
When you go off a drug, a mind altering drug,
Yeah.
you will often go nuts. It's just
Right.
addicts understand that a lot of people who are on psychiatric drugs grew up in what I call WASP culture, squeaky clean, evangelical, upper middle class homes, and they don't know that it's actually this kind of stuff you would get from street drugs.
Hmm. So, but then what ends up happening is the people get thrown back in the hospital and they're told, like you said, this well, if you take your medication, then you'd be fine.
Hmm.
But it's actually the so-called medication that's causing the problem in the first place, and then the withdrawal from the medication is also causing a reaction, which leads to further so-called diagnoses. So were you labeled as bipolar all this time, or did you have other so-called
Oh, I had a
diagnoses?
number of labels.
Okay.
One was borderline personality disorder
Okay.
because I was devastated when a guy broke up with me all of a sudden.
So you had a real difficult life experience, and psychiatry found a way to medicalize that.
Yeah, yeah. The funny thing is, I would often get relationship advice from women who had more messed up relationships than I did.
Yeah. Oh gosh. So okay. Is there anything else you want to tell us about that whole awful experience in psychiatry in the system?
Yeah, it was wonderful how I was praying about it, and suddenly an opportunity to escape the system presented itself, and so I took advantage of it.
Good for
I
you.
believe it was providence. And I managed to taper off and complete my taper almost 3 years before 2020, which really helped. I mean, it was like there's no way I could have tapered off after that
And
stuff started.
how did Providence intervene? How did that opportunity present itself?
My father retired and they moved to a remote rural area
Mm-hmm.
just when just around the same time I decided to begin my taper. They
Mm-hmm.
offered to let me come with them, and so I did. My parents were kind of disgusted with how the day treatments had gone. They offered structure to my day, but I didn't like being told repeatedly how crazy and hopeless I was.
Mm-hmm.
And they
Yeah.
also took to dogpiling patients who were acting up like cults do.
Oh, and what is that? What were the what's dogpiling?
Basically, I don't know if this is a calculated technique or not,
Yeah.
but day workers will sometimes get you understand they're the grunts, the lower level people in the mental field. They
Mm-hmm.
will get other patients to dogpile on one patient who is not doing things the way they're supposed to,
All
according to
right.
the system, and they will tell them all their faults and tear them down.
That's awful.
And then they will tell them affirmative statements afterward
Oh,
if they start acting right.
all right. If they comply.
Mhm.
Oh, I'm so sorry, Rachel. Um, that went on for so long, but I'm grateful that you found that opportunity and you took that opportunity. And so 20, so that was 2017, you said,
Yeah,
about 2017, and then you read Glassner's book and you mentioned in our earlier conversation that scales fell from your eyes. You started describe that a little bit, like waking up to the reality of what was happening.
um, it was a relief in many ways
Uh-huh.
because I knew that there was a way I could get better. I didn't want to be crazy,
Hmm.
and I hated the idea of being crazy forever and letting that be my sole identity.
Yeah. So you started to wake up to your real potential, who you really are, and to see things more clearly.
Yeah.
Um, Anything else you want to tell us about your journey since 2017 and to the present, about the process of healing and coming off the drugs and so forth?
For me, a big thing, I'm still working on this, but a
Mm,
big thing was forgiveness.
yes.
I would go to bed feeling sick. I would have to go to bed in the afternoons hurting all over, and my muscles would cramp. It was just so horrible. As I said, I still have like It's similar, though it isn't the same as chronic fatigue syndrome or fibromyalgia. Um, the mysterious muscle pains and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And probiotics help a little, and eating right and exercising.
Mm-hmm.
But it was like I had a really low energy. I couldn't get much done at all. But I
Yeah.
had a bad case of, like, I had almost no spoons at all to get through each day, and I'd have
Yeah.
to take a nap every afternoon.
Right.
And when I did, I would force myself to pray. Please forgive the people who wronged me, God. Please forgive the psychiatrists and the nurses and the
Mm-hmm.
caseworkers because they didn't know what they were doing.
Mm-hmm.
Please help me to forgive them, God, because I am still angry at them. I know you
Yeah.
want me to forgive them, but I
Yeah.
need your help.
Yeah. That's such a great prayer, and we all need Heavenly Father's help in forgiving, and because we all go through difficult experiences, and I think you mentioned about these, maybe except for the nurse Ratchet, even we need to forgive her as well, but most of the people who are drawn into psychiatry on the the doctor's end are are good people who genuinely want to help people. They just, like Rachel said, they don't know. And how could they know? Because hardly anyone knows about the history of psychiatry, and so it's an insidious thing that how psychiatry uses so many good people on both ends to cause so much harm. But yes, definitely forgiveness is a huge part of the healing process. I'm grateful that you've been able to do that. Um, I would like to talk to Rachel more in future episodes. We can talk more because she has a great depth of knowledge and understanding about these things, and we can have many more conversations. But I also wanted to give Rachel an opportunity to talk about some other things of her creative work. I've mentioned, so her books are Maxwell's Rules and Anemia, and I'll post links to them. And do you want to tell us anything about your chronicles?
Oh, Greencrest Chronicles.
Yeah,
They're
or
set in Greencrest, Indiana. That's what I was thinking.
okay.
Oh, Consumptive Chronicles.
Yeah,
That's
consumptive
my
is
Substack account.
yeah, your Substack,
I,
yeah.
I haven't written for over a month, I'm
Oh,
afraid,
okay. That's
but it
okay.
has some interesting things.
Yeah.
It talks about current stuff that's going on. A lot of it has to do with doctors and the stuff
Right.
that's controlled by them,
Right.
and it also has to do with Christianity and why I believe the Western Church has lost its saltiness.
Yes.
Not just the liberal part, but the conservative has a lot that it should be doing and isn't.
Okay.
Um, Basically, a lot of what conservative churches are doing is just a reaction. They're not being proactive and doing what the Bible says so much as they're reacting to what the world is doing, and the worldly
Yeah.
churches too.
I see. So these are some of the topics that you address in your
Yeah.
consumptive
About
chronicles.
my two novels, Anemia, I they actually were impacted by psychiatry. Anemia um has a realist. It's about this monster. It's like the scary version of Twilight.
Okay.
The vampire boyfriend turns out to be evil, believe it or not.
Uh-huh.
And
Okay.
it has to do with emotional abuse
Oh,
that he
okay.
uses.
Anemia.
And
Okay.
I actually, when I wrote it, I thought, huh, and I realized I'd learned a lot about emotional abuse because of psychiatry. The whole
Right.
system incorporates it. It's like a cult.
Right.
And then Maxwell's Rules, I wrote that. I didn't write the whole thing as novel form till recently, but I wrote part of a screenplay in '99. Um, Basically, it is about it helps me to vent my feelings of being infantilized and caught in a perpetual adolescence,
Mm-hmm.
because that is what comes from psychiatry. You're not
Yeah.
allowed to move on and make adult milestones. You're
Mm-hmm.
not allowed to have an adult life where you
Yeah.
marry, have kids,
Right.
have a career, establish
Mm-hmm.
a life for yourself. You're
Right.
supposed to be a perpetual teenager. That's
Mm-hmm.
how they want you to live. And you'll
Mm-hmm.
die in your early 50s too if you
Yeah.
do what they tell you to.
Right. But as we know, there's hope because obviously you're here talking to us now.
Yeah,
And are you taking any drugs? I mean,
levothyroxine.
right, but not psychotropic.
No,
Like
none.
the you're off of all of those that cocktail that they gave you.
The only thing I take is occasionally I'll take something to help me sleep over the
Yeah.
counter.
Yeah.
And I was surprised at how my family was, how okay my family was with it.
Well, that's good. Well, Rachel, thank you so much for being willing to share these, difficult things. And I'm so glad that you not only survived all of it, but you, and not only that you lived to tell the tale, but I mean, you are doing so great. And I think there's such a great future. Um,
Thanks.
so, keep hanging in there and, um, I hope that we can talk again soon.
Okay.
All right. Thank you, Rachel. And